So, Jacky, here we are. You're beside your wall that isn't a wall, if anyone's seeing this, and I've got the beach behind me. So, for people on the podcast, well, bad luck. So, today we're going to look at something it's a learning model that, when I stumbled across it, Dreyfus and Dreyfus model, Stewart and Hubert, I found out, I liked it a lot. It's 5 stages, it's 6 words, it's got simplicity going for it, it's generic, it's wonderful. You can break it down into task or a whole role. Well, it's wonderful. I like it. You like it too. We'll look at it very shortly. But before we do that, do a quick hello. This is who I am.
Hello, this is who I am. Hi. Right. I've done these sessions with Andrew before, but in case anybody hasn't seen those, I'm Jacky Leonard. I'm a learning and development consultant based in North Wales. I think that's probably enough.
Oh, that's plenty, because we've lost everybody by now because they just want us to get on with it. So let's get on with it then, Jacky. So let's start looking at it. We're talking about it. Let's start looking at it. This is where I start sharing screens, which gets very technologically scary. Are you seeing that as a big screen?
I am.
Well, hey, right. So what we got here, and you know it, and I know what's coming up here. We've got essentially 5 stages. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Should we look at them in turn? Let's start by explaining the first one. Novice is not an accusation. It's not an insult. Everyone's a novice when they start something, aren't they?
I think that's very true. The problem with putting labels on things is people don't necessarily like to be in that pigeonhole, do they, or popped in that box. But it's, of course, it's true. We all have to start somewhere. The speed in which we remove ourselves from novice into another area.
We progress.
Well, we would hope is a different is a different thing. But yes, of course, we're all novices at some point when we're learning something. Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess it's a humility thing. You're right. Some people don't like the label. What other labels could there be? I don't know. I don't care. Other people have gone before us and thought about it, published around it. So novice sounds good enough to me. Right. So when you start something, when you're beginning from scratch, you really do start from point 1. So where you progress to in terms of the Dreyfus and Dreyfus model, and this has had a lot of attention over not very many years, where you progress to is, and I'll try and get the technology, here it goes. We move from novice, they say, to advanced beginner. Once again, you're quite right. What do we call the next stage? They call it advanced beginner. In other words, you're no longer a novice, but all you are, if you want to see it in those terms, is an advanced beginner.
Yeah, and I think that's quite right. It doesn't seem like a big leap, does it?
Can be.
But it's small steps. But I think sometimes that initial piece of learning can be tricky. Yeah, it isn't something that we necessarily will move on to quickly.
Yeah.
It takes a little bit of time to embed. Knowing and learning are 2 different things.
Could take years, Jacky.
So I think that small step from novice to advanced beginner is an important step, and it's one where we can take some time to embed the information that we're being given and use it.
Yeah, and I genuinely mean it can take years, because the world changes, the demands on us are constant. This model can be contextualized into a whole role or to any aspect of a role. That's what I like about it. So yeah. If we're doing something complex, if we're learning something big and complicated, it can take years to move even halfway from novice to advanced beginner. And I'll tell you what, you can move backwards in this model too, because it's a dynamic model. The world and context is dynamic. It's moving forward. And if we're not, we're in effect moving backwards. So what comes after advanced beginner? We can look at the whole model and then discuss all elements of it. The next stage is competent. And that's a good use of words because of what follows it. So once we've actually mastered advanced beginner and we might have stopped toing and froing, we move into competent country. What do you think of that?
Well, I think I would be very thrilled to be competent in most disciplines or activity. Again, it's a label that some people might not like. I think the point you made earlier, which is this may be a whole or part of a whole, is an important one. So you can, if you have a big role, for example, in an organization, you may be further round this model that in some places than in others.
Yeah.
So yes, you may be competent, more competent. We'll use that because we're on that in that box, more competent in some areas than in others.
Yeah, I mean, learning to drive can take some people years. They don't become competent as judged by a competent person to make that judgment ever for many years. So yes, there's no time scale set for this. It's whatever the context demands of people.
Yeah, and actually, as we know, within the driving context is a good example, isn't it? We know that you can achieve competency, and somebody can sign you off, and you can tear up your L plates. But actually, we can make errors of judgment and mistakes that novice, that we expect a novice to make.
Well, that's very true. And if we're looking at this in the job context, and what I like about this way of doing things, Jacky, is that because it's interactive, it's making me think about things live. There's things that emerge. And I'm now thinking, in a real workplace, if we don't stay abreast of what the developments are in our role, we can go back to novice, even though we've been in a job for 15 or 20 years. That's why I get angry sometimes. Well, not angry. I get annoyed when people say, I've got 30 years experience. And I think, yeah, but how many times have you gone back to being a novice because the world's moved more quickly than you have?
Well, and that's often 30 years experience of doing the same in the same way. I'm not sure that's experience.
1 year, 30 years time. One year, 30 times, yeah. So right, it's dynamic, it's moving, it moves at different paces, it's subject to all sorts of other variables. And the next stage beyond competence is proficient.
Oh, now this reminds me of my cycle.
Oh yeah.
When I was a child, I had my cycling proficiency test. I feel really important about that now, that it's that far around the cycle.
Are you still proficient, or have you become a novice in the meantime?
Well, it would depend on where and how I'm cycling, because the last time I got on a bike, I fell off. So that's a novice. That's a schoolgirl error, I suppose. But yes, which again goes to prove that there are going to be elements. It was an error in judgment that caused me to fall off.
And all right, let's be
fault.
Let's be realistic. All of these stages don't require you to be perfect in terms of what it took to get there. So just because you might make an error doesn't make it's not like snakes and ladders. You don't go all the way back to being an advanced beginner. Depending, of course, upon what the error is, maybe it does. This is interesting because at what point do you become genuinely proficient, which is different to competent? And the judgments of that will be different contextually, occupationally, in organization, our own standards. I've been using this model with clients in the coaching context. It's been interesting to ask people I consider to be highly proficient where they are. The best people I work with rarely feel they've got beyond advanced beginner. The hardest people to work with are those that already feel they're at least proficient.
And going back to my cycling analogy, I think proficiency requires practice. If we want to be good at something, we're not only got to be receptive to learning, having new experiences and learning from them, but we've got to practice.
Yeah, and also what goes with proficiency, it certainly did with your cycling, is being judged as that by an external party. Sometimes our own self-assessment, hey, I'm proficient. Hey, we haven't come to the green box yet. If we think we're better than we are, we may well not have progressed as far around this model as we think we have. And the opposite, people who have got skills that they're using and are not themselves recognizing could be selling themselves short. I'm working with people who are really confident and don't see themselves that. Sorry, I cut you in.
Yeah, sorry, I'm very pleased that there's no arrows on this. And I think when we produced this, we purposely didn't put any arrows around that circle, because you right. I think it's an important point that it's not a one-way process. It's not a linear model, and it's certainly not a one-way process.
Yeah, we don't like linear, do we? Because we like things which are more contingent. I'll have to look that up, make sure I've used the right word. Contingent on all sorts of variables. But I do like the idea of proficient being partly as judged by others, not just yourself. Yeah, I think that's a bit. I mean, I've been picking up articles, particularly in a health and a librarianship context, by people who have looked into this model in great depth, 6 words, and they've got pages and pages and pages of academic analysis in there. This really gets people going.
I think the two words at the bottom there, so competence and proficiency, they are both judged, aren't they? They are two areas where we're, particularly in the workplace, there's more talk there about competency than proficiency. So those two elements tend to be things that we're assessed, we're measured, we're judged upon.
Yeah, and if and when a probation period, and it happens less often than it used to, I think, but maybe I'm wrong. If for instance you're putting someone through a 3 or 6 month probationary period and genuinely monitoring performance, you might be interesting, isn't it? Do you share that with people? This is a performance management model, isn't it? Do you ever share with a new starter, look, you're starting here, I want in 6 months to see you in the yellow box, and we'll talk about how to get there? Or just leave it a chance and say, hey, we haven't spoken for 6 months, let's see where you've got to. That's bonkers.
Yeah, sadly, Andrew, I think that in some organizations the latter is true.
So it's a bit unfair, isn't it? People in the workplace very often don't know what criteria and expectations of them are requiring them to move around this model. The last one of which, for anyone who's still with us, is this word we don't like.
Yeah, expert, to drip under pressure. Yeah, I mean, I try and avoid that. It's a very lofty word. I'm not sure that I'm expert in anything. I think it's aspirational expertise.
Yeah.
And I think it's always, for me, always aspirational.
Yeah, you know, I can very easily get into cheesy speak here. It's a journey, not a destination. It's a journey without arrival. And I think you're right. Anyone who calls himself an expert is kind of shutting the door to anything else. No, I'm an expert. What else is there? Well, congratulations. There's nothing more for you because you've got it all.
And we know that's not true. And I think that, you know, if you all right, call yourself an expert, but let's call yourself an expert with an open mind, which suggests that that you're still on that journey and you're still receptive to new ideas and new concepts and new experiences, and that you want to learn from them. And I think I can live with it then.
Well, you know, I like this word becoming. It wasn't until I started looking into these sorts of models of developing professional competence that I realized that a book that I've liked for a long time called On Becoming a Leader by the late now Warren Bennis. No, I said Buffett. Well, Warren Bennis. He's such a favored writer. I nearly forgot his name. But he wrote the book On Becoming a Leader, and he clearly chose the words well because he knew what he was talking about. It wasn't about becoming an expert leader. It's on becoming a leader, this journey that never ends.
Yeah, and I think that's what's missing there, isn't it? And I would love it if we could change that box and call it becoming an expert.
I don't know, Jackie. I'm with you. I think the word expert is aspirational. I don't have a problem with moving towards becoming an expert. It's just recognizing that it's something you'll never achieve, because you might achieve it for a day, but the next day things have moved on such that you're not there yet.
Yeah. And you know, you're naive to think. If you think any different, it's naive, isn't it? Because we know, I mean, and what we've been through in the last few years with the results of the pandemic has shown us that within L&D, if you haven't been receptive to moving with the times and changing the way you've done things, you know, most of us,
Jackie, we weren't doing this 5 years ago.
Oh God, no! Most of us went right the way back to be novice at certain things, didn't we? I mean, I was very fortunate. I was using Zoom to coach in 2016.
I wasn't.
But we were catching up. We were learning, desperately learning new things to keep functioning.
And yet on LinkedIn, where I spend a lot of time, I see people calling themselves gurus, learning experts, learning wizard. That's one of my favorites. Basically saying I'm an expert in. And every time I see that, I think, oh no, it's probably a poor choice of words. Or is this someone projecting, I know it all?
Well, the older I get, the more I realize I know very little.
Yes, it's a humbling thing, isn't it? Yeah. I find it quite liberating not needing to prove you're great anymore. I used to do that in my 20s, but now I'm fed up with it. So looking at this model, applications, I'm using it very successfully because of its simplicity and because of its directness, and the message is so strong with coaching clients. And I'm saying, basically, where are you in relation to your whole role, or do you want to tell me about a part of it? And it makes people think. It makes people, and then they weigh up other factors. Am I prepared to be honest? Does Andrew know me well enough to know that what I'm going to tell him is at odds with what he probably sees? I can say, where does your manager see you, which presents a whole new dynamic situation. It's got a lot of uses, this.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. Like, you know, I think we're both raving fans of it, and I think it can be used in a variety of different settings.
Okay, so we could go on and on and on, but we're trying not to. So, closure point, is there anything left unsaid that you want to say about this before we shut ourselves down?
I think that people should embrace this model within their learning, within their coaching, share it around and discuss it. Because I think just by discussing what it means to you, or where you believe you are on it, that, you know, that generates reflection around it.
Well, I'll go with that. I've nothing more really to add to that. So thank you very much.
Cheers, Andrew.